Matt Weston is the Labour MP for Warwick and Leamington, joins us now on BBC CWR. Mr. Weston, very good morning to you.
Yeah, good morning, Phil.
Thanks for joining us this morning. You tweeted last night with messages of support for Boris Johnson. You said that the PM's now in the hands of the NHS, this nation's most precious institution alongside our democracy. You must have been, like many of us, shocked at first to hear this news.
Yes, I am. And you know, first and foremost, Phil, my thoughts are with him and his partner, Carrie Simmons, who's expecting their first child in the summer, and his wider family. I mean, the entire situation is unimaginable. And I guess that underlines just how serious this whole situation is, because it can clearly strike anyone quite indiscriminately and just illustrates how vulnerable we all are.
And just I'm putting the politics aside for one moment. I was saying he's been admitted to intensive care 11 days after his original diagnosis. I'm just wondering, how wise was it for the Prime Minister to have carried on working? And we saw him, hook up with the rest of the cabinet last week online. We know he's had conversations with some of his ministers, certainly over the weekend. Saturday, Dominic Raab said was the last time he spoke to him. How wise was it for him to try and carry on working, to sort of push through this, when actually it had probably done himself and indeed the country a favour if he'd have just rested a bit earlier?
Well, I think it's clearly understandable that he would have wanted to carry on in that role. It called for strong leadership and so on, and he'd led the situation for several weeks. So he's particularly familiar with what was going on. But I think there comes a time when you've got to accept and really, first and foremost, your own health and the responsibility to your colleagues, but to your family and others. So I think he's done the wise thing of allowing Dominic Raab, the Foreign Secretary, to take over. And I just, I can't say it enough. I just wish him well, and I hope he recovers speedily.
And in terms of yourself, Mr. Weston, obviously over the weekend, the results of the Labour leadership process becoming public with Angela Rayner as deputy leader, and now you have a brand new leader in Keir Starmer.
Yes, and I think that's a very good appointment. I think Keir is an exceptional politician and person. He's very principled, has great set of values, and I think he'll show terrific leadership for the party. But I think it's also, if I may say, I think it's very good news for the country. It's very important that whatever the issue, that the opposition is strong, can challenge the government, and be a constructive and, if I may say, critical friend in a circumstance such as this particular crisis. If I just may say one other thing, and that is, I think that the government is done the right thing in putting Dominic Raab in charge temporarily, but I would hope that time is given to Boris Johnson to fully recover. And I think someone like Michael Gove would be the most sensible and best placed person to take over in the short term, because people like Dominic Raab have got their own department to look after. There's a huge issue with getting British nationals repatriated. Huge issues also in terms of the global response to this.
It's an issue you brought up with him directly, I know, in the House of Commons at Questions. But so you're suggesting this morning that actually Michael Gove, in the title of Grand Duchy of Lancaster, holds that role, obviously, in the Cabinet Office as well, that he actually should be an interim, should it come to that, an interim leader, and not the Foreign Secretary.
Yes, I mean, I have nothing to play in this, and no grudges. Obviously, I just think that it's so important. It's such a massive issue for all the departments, and so that someone like Dominic Raab as Foreign Secretary has this a lot to do with getting UK nationals repatriated, but also the global response to this crisis, because it's not just to these UK shores; it's how we rebuild the health across the world, but also the economy as well. And that will take a huge amount of time in coordinating with other countries. So I would suggest humbly that someone like Michael Gove is probably best placed to coordinate in the short term until Boris Johnson can recover and return.
And very quickly and finally, Mr. Weston, a lot of people will be, unsettled by this, won't they? And they'll see the newspaper headlines jumping out this morning. The Daily Mirror saying Boris is in a fight for his life. Are we in safe hands without Boris Johnson?
Yes, we are. And I would just urge the public to believe that all politicians, whether they be the government or in opposition, we are working collectively to try and bring about a resolution to this crisis. There are some very capable people clearly in the government, and certainly there are in opposition, and we are asking the right questions of government. And there are some brilliant people behind this, whether they be in our public services, our civil servants, or indeed how the emergency services and the armed forces have stepped up and provided that extra resilience. So I'm sure people are very concerned because it is really unprecedented to find ourselves in this situation. But I am very confident that the leadership will come through, and I'm sure the opposition has a part to play in helping guide the government.
Matt Weston, Labour MP for Warwick and Leamington, with us this morning on BBC CWR. Mr. Weston, thanks very much indeed.